Today we are going to dive into F-16s flowing into the Ukraine. Are these F-16s actually going to change the tide of the war of Russia versus Ukraine? We're going to get into that throughout this video. We're also going to break down the specific F-16s that Ukraine is getting and some specific adaptations that have been made to those F-16s. And that'll help us decide how mission capable these F-16s actually are and what they're actually going to be used for in the Russia-Ukraine war. Ultimately, it's a win for Ukraine getting new metal. Any Air Force that gets new metal and that helps replace old metal, like the MiG-29s that Ukraine had, that's a win. So think about countries like Iran, they couldn't get parts for their aircraft. They couldn't maintain their fleet effectively. That just starts to degrade an Air Force at a rate that you would never want to have happen, especially if you are in a conflict. So the fact that Ukraine is now getting fresh metal, fresh aircraft, albeit slightly older, this is going to really be a leg up for them as they look for this war to continue. I mean, the war has gone on for 2+ years, so no one's seen an end in sight yet. So they're going to need fresh jets one way or the other. And the fact that they're getting F-16s, albeit just slightly used models, this is a huge win. Denmark, Belgium, and Norway have been the main providers of F-16s to Ukraine so far. These have been Block 15 F-16s. But these F-16s didn't just sit around without any updates for decades. They were updated in the 2000s to bring them up to a state that is basically equivalent to the F-16s that the US flew in the Gulf War, with the addition of a JHMX, a joint helmet mounted cueing system. And personally, having flown the F-16 myself, using a JHMX is one of the biggest advantages you can have as a fighter pilot. I also used it in the F-15E, and the fact that you can just look to your side and you can see a little diamond over top of an air-to-air target or an air-to-ground target. You can see your airspeed and altitude. And most importantly, you can use an AIM-9X missile and shoot off bore sight. So you don't have to be looking directly straight ahead at the aircraft to get that heat-seeking air-to-air AIM-9X to lock on. You can be looking off to the side, get it to lock on with HOTAS, hands on stick and throttle, and then shoot that AIM-9X without having to have the aircraft right in front of you. That's just a huge advantage for any pilot. And that's just the air-to-air advantage. When it comes to the air-to-ground advantage, having targets highlighted on the ground for you, it's a really big force multiplier because it helps you work with JTACs, Joint Terminal Air Controllers, so you can see exactly what they're talking about. You can basically look down and see right in front of you, like pressing the easy button, the target that you're supposed to drop a weapon on. This is a huge advantage that any fighter pilot, any fighter squadron is going to want. And additionally, Greece has pledged upwards of 30 F-16s, they're Block 30s, that could be sent to the Ukraine as well. Now, what the adaptations have been on these since Greece has gotten them, that remains to be seen. Additionally, and this is probably even bigger news, Lockheed Martin has offered to sell the Ukraine Block 70 and Block 72 F-16s. Those F-16s are primarily being bought by Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and my assumption would be eventually the US will buy some of those brand spanking new Block 72s eventually as well. These are essentially the most modernized 4th generation fighter ever created. It's on par with the F-15EX. So the fact that Lockheed Martin is offering these to Ukraine, it shows that the US government, the special office that allows military sales, has approved of this. So Ukraine, if they wanted, they could get fresh copies of F-16s. Now, the price tag that's going to come with those isn't going to be a donation. You know, like Belgium's donating and Norway is donating and Greece is going to donate because they have skin in the game. They're over in Europe and maybe they fear that Russia is going to extend the conflict one day. It could be decades down the road, could be a long time down the road, but they don't want Russia to do what they're doing to Ukraine to them. So they have the, let's just say, the motivation to give a little bit of fighter jet charity, whereas Lockheed Martin, no, you're going to have to pay top dollar for these Block 72s, but it might be worth it at the end of the day. And I think it's probably Ukraine's military strategy to test some of their tactics and start to build their air-to-air and air-to-ground doctrine with the new F-16, which is going to totally shift and change the way that they've done it in the past with MiG-29s. MiG-29s are largely ground control intercept reliable, where they need to hear certain point outs from ground stations to know where aircraft are. And that's really really tough and really challenging when you're operating in a very dynamic environment. Now, some of the tough things that Ukraine's going to run into with these F-16s is the fact that it's essentially heavily contested airspace in all parts of the war with Russia and Ukraine. If you look at the eastern side where Russia has made some gains and Ukraine's kind of fighting back into it, it's still very heavily contested regions. So there's going to have to be a coordinated strike from Ukraine if they're going to use these F-16s kind of as they're designed. There's going to have to be a coordinated strike where they take out a lot of those air defenses first, and then they roll the F-16s in for sort of like an interdiction mission that allows the F-16s to operate in a more, well, let's just say a less contested environment. Basing some of these F-16s outside of the Ukraine, which in my opinion is a very smart move, because Russians have essentially offered a bounty to Russian soldiers that take out these F-16s, however that happens to be, whether that's missile operators, some sort of clandestine operation to try to destroy some of these things. So these are hot ticket items, and a lot of it is winning the war with the message. So the fact that Ukraine's gotten these F-16s, it just goes to show that the West is, again, even more committed to help them hold their ground as much as they can. So it's a strategic win for Ukraine to have these F-16s. And then again, modernizing their force. Now they can start focusing on higher and higher blocks of F-16s, integrating that technology, and just giving themselves the advantage when it comes to having an up-to-date arsenal of fighter jets. Any country is going to want that, and the fact that Ukraine now has they're on the doorstep to that. They could get the Block 70s, 72s in the next couple years. That's a huge advantage for them. And another advantage, in my opinion, is the fact that now Ukraine's going to have more of an ability to participate in LFEs, or large force exercises. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw a squadron of Ukrainians over at a red flag or a green flag eventually. So they're going to have top of the line training that's going to kind of come in with this package of F-16s, which is just going to kind of lead the way for them to be an integrated partner in these large force exercises. They're going to be able to grow their expertise, and this is just something that Ukraine knows is a huge win. And Russia probably knows that the F-16 is not going to be able to operate in a lot of the contested areas, but it's probably sweating a little bit knowing that this is just the tip of the iceberg of the technology that could be integrated into the F-16 and what else Ukraine's going to get down the road. And then when it comes to dogfighting, once Ukrainian pilots start to get a decent amount of training in the F-16 and they're operating with the JHEMX, that new adaptation for Ukraine that was just added in with the AIM-9X, that's going to be a big showstopper for Russia. I mean, it's going to be a no easy day type scenario where they're going to send up Su-30s, potentially Su-27s to try to go up against this thing. But with the off-bore sight capability that the JHEMX and AIM-9X has, Russia really has nothing that can compete with that. They've got some infrared search and track type technology, but it's not quite as sharp and as good as this JHEMX is going to be. So in a dogfight, I'm going to hand the dogfight over to a well-trained Ukrainian pilot in an F-16 with JHEMX over a Su-27 or Su-30 pilot. And at the end of the day, the F-16 is going to keep getting better. So as the Block 30 arrives, potentially more technology, Block 70, 72 arrives. As far as this turning the tide, which you've all came here to watch this video for, turning the entire tide of the war, I don't see that happening. But I see the advantage to Ukraine in this situation because now they've got their foot in the door with the F-16. They're modernizing their fleet. Thanks so much for watching the video, guys. Please click another video. I'll see you on that video and subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot to me. See you on the next video.